Hello and welcome to this Serial Geek TV episode commentary for Turtles on Trial, an episode of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles produced by MWS. You knew I had to record a commentary for this episode, didn't you? It's one of my favourites of the series due to the very awesome story, but also the much celebrated, rightly so, Japanese animation throughout. Seriously, speak to any Turtles fan and ask them what the best looking episode of the series is, and I guarantee most, if not all, will cite this one. Visually, every single shot is on point. It's rather phenomenal. You've heard me speak on other commentaries about how shows sent overseas to be animated could come back with very mixed results. This was due to a number of factors, the key ones being that the studios that received the outsourced work would have to outsource certain scenes themselves due to their own workload, or that a studio tasked with animating an episode would hand it off to 3 if not more animation teams. You see, many Japanese and Korean animation studios could deliver different levels of quality. You often have the A team of animators, the B team of animators, and the C team of animators. As you can imagine, when you sent your production overseas, you always wanted the A team of animators, but this was not always guaranteed. In short, Turtles on Trial legitimately looks like an A-team production from start to finish. Pay attention throughout this episode to how on model the Turtles themselves stay. There's no obvious deviation. I first saw this episode when it aired in the UK on Children's BBC on April the 10th, 1990, and we were all talking about it at school the very next day, even though it had been censored to death. You've hopefully heard me talk about this before on this channel, specifically on episode 15 where I showcased all of the edits made to the episode, some resulting in some rather confusing scenes. Over 1 minute of material was removed from the broadcast of this episode in the UK. It was crazy, all because of Michelangelo's nunchucks and Shredder wielding a crossbow. Oh, and Bebop rocking a ball and chain of some sort. Yeah, and yes, even though we had to endure the show as Hero Turtles, we all knew the real title of the show. Such odd censorship. So yeah, here we are getting into the story for the episode. Clayton Kellerman, a Morton Downey Jr. type talk show host, and I use the term talk show very loosely, is waging war on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or, as this appeared in the UK broadcast, the Teenage Mutant Turtles. Yeah, when the word ninja was uttered by a character, they'd simply edit the dialogue and rejig the footage. But this plot, as I've mentioned before, is just fantastic. Written by the late great Michael Reeves, whom I have mentioned and celebrated on this channel. He was known for his work on shows like Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, The Incredible Hulk, The Real Ghostbusters, Batman the Animated Series, Gargoyles, and a plethora of others. But some people sometimes forget, myself included, that he contributed quite a bit to this series, penning 19 episodes. The reason I may forget about certain writers for this show is primarily down to something that I may have mentioned on this channel before. Around about the 13th, 14th episode of Season 3, myself and many of my friends checked out of the cartoon, even though we were still kind of collecting the toys and I myself was most definitely buying the comic books. But yeah, I just felt that the cartoon was running its course by Season 3. Trust me when I say I was wrong in that belief. But you know what it was? This may sound crazy, but I remember the Ninja Sword of Nowhere episode. Unless I'm mistaken, that was the first episode to feature a different voice actor for one of the main characters. And when that started happening, I remember us at school talking about how the show lost what had made it special because we all loved the voice cast. But as I record this commentary, it may blow your minds to know I've never seen every episode of this series. But that's the beauty of this channel. In time, I will. Dusan Mitrovic, my evil comrade arms on this channel, he loves the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon, and if it takes him the rest of his life, he'll ensure that I watch them all. And again, talking about the visuals for this episode, the way Krang and especially the Shredder are rendered is incredible. Outside of the first 5 episodes, the look of Shredder in this episode may be the best, and as the episode progresses, you're going to see some utterly amazing images of the bladed ninja master.
Uh-oh, trouble! No problem, April. Trouble is our middle name.
And the Turtles spring into action. A great little action scene featuring one of my favourite comedy scenes with Michelangelo. Just watch this.
Oh, outstanding, mon frere! Now check out these chucks! Yeah!
I love Townsend Coleman's "yeah" My goodness, the voice actors for this show may be one of the strongest assembled for a 1980s cartoon. That said, there would be a lot of contenders. And now the people of New York have turned on the Turtles, not that they were their strongest supporters to begin with. And that's the message of this episode. Fearmongers like Clayton Kellerman and those in the real world find out what people are ignorant or uncertain about and do their best to exploit the hell out of it, primarily for ratings and these days attention on social media. Let's get back to this wonderful cartoon. Look at the visuals. Every single sequence, especially those featuring the Turtles, is rendered with such an attention to detail. Speaking of the visuals, because this will happen a lot in this commentary, since 1997 I've been collecting animation art, primarily from Filmation's He-Man and She-Ra cartoons, because for the longest time I had access to the warehouse where the artwork was stored. Well, in 2022 I began collecting animation art from this show. Why? It was because over the years, cells from this episode have actually shown up quite a bit online, primarily at auction houses, but also on eBay within the last few years. I have a gorgeous shredder cell from later in this episode that Dushan kindly tracked down, and I think it cost me something like $40 for an animation cell of such quality from one of the best episodes of the series. It was an absolute bargain. And now we have Bebop and Rocksteady turn up in the episode, and hey, we find out that Bebop's favourite show is the Slurps, leading to a great line from Krang.
Pretty good reception for being 5 miles underground.
I love that very real world line. And hey, you want to talk about visual detail and quality? Bebop and Rocksteady have never looked more detailed, imposing or meaner. Man, just look at the level of detail on Krang. All that shading seems to make him leap from the screen. Watching this episode back, I so wish this animation team had gotten to work on more episodes. We see their work pop up again on the 5th Turtle and the Ninja Sword of Nowhere, and the visual style is evident in more than a few other episodes of the series and later series, but the quality of animation is never there like it is in this glorious episode. And apologies if I'm heaping too much praise on Turtles on Trial, but this does feel like one of those lightning in a bottle moments for a cartoon, when everything comes together in one single moment to create something very special.
You're right.
One thing I love about how Clayton Kellerman is presented, and this would have been decided upon during the storyboard phase, is that numerous shots of the character have him in close-up or progressively getting closer to the camera as his rage grows. They clearly wanted to present him as an utterly dislikable loudmouth, and it works.
Don't worry, Michelangelo. You'll do just fine.
And for the first time in the series, we learn that poor old Michelangelo, you know, the party dude, actually has stage fright. And I guess it kind of works for a character that packs so much bravado. Just look at this shot of the group. The level of detail is simply gorgeous. The shading on each and every character, the fact that all the characters move independently of one another. I'd love to know the budget for this episode, to be honest. One thing some of you may be aware of is that as the series progressed, it was decided to change the entire colour palette of Splinter. His clothing became a strong magenta, and his fur actually became much darker. I wasn't a fan of the later look, to be honest. It kind of looked a little cheap. And as someone that was far too young to watch RoboCop when it came out, though not young enough to have a Marvel Productions cartoon targeted towards me, the design of this vehicle that Krang desires is clearly very much inspired by Ed 209. As Act 2 begins, I'm going to actually say something critical about this first image of the Technodrome we see. It's not one of the best images of the base of operations that we see during its time at the Earth's core. If you go back and look again, that opening shot actually looks like a model sheet painted with a few more shades than your standard model sheet. There, I said it, one negative thing about this episode. And unless I'm mistaken, this is the very first appearance of what would come to be known as Krang's Bubble Walker, which came with his action figure.
It sounds like the perfect assignment for a couple of yo-yos. I made her funny.
That line, I made her funny, it just wasn't a term we in the UK were familiar with. We understood the intended purpose of the line, but yeah, when characters said that in 1980s cartoons, it kind of made us in the UK go, eh? And now the villains have entered the museum, which will lead to one of the best confrontations between the forces for good and evil in the series. I'm so excited just watching this episode back. There's a great shot of April O'Neil coming up as she hangs on to Michelangelo for dear life. And yeah, Splinter is about to inform the Turtles that Shredder and his goons are at the museum. Oh, it's happening. We're getting there. The Turtles perform a lovely U-turn here. Be sure to check out the frames when they're on the way back to see some gorgeous detail. And as a little bonus, we have Krang and a couple of rock soldiers heading off to procure Not Ed 209. That's what I'm going to call it, Not Ed 209.
Quickly, before we're seen!
Hey,
A great establishing shot here shows the room that the fight will initially take place in, and if you look carefully, all the pieces that come into play are in place, and the villains leap into action, prompting the Turtles and April to take cover. But just watch how these shots are directed. Donatello flipping into battle, dodging the lasers and throwing his bow staff at its intended target, with the hanging statue crushing the villains, followed by Donatello's bow staff effortlessly snapping back into his hand. And then we have this awesome shot of April's camera filming the action, with Rocksteady and Bebop taking such a battering that saliva is present. Look at this, Leonardo taking a shot at Shredder, who skillfully blocks his attack. And this close-up of Shredder, I own a cell from that sequence, and it's as beautiful as it looks here. And this fight is just a reminder to those who love to spout the narrative that in the original series the Turtles didn't use their weapons. Yes, they did, but like any true warrior, they would also use their surroundings whilst delivering great little lines.
How's that for poetic justice?
What a scene. And now we're back with Krang and his Dimension X henchmen as they attempt to steal Not Ed 209. I just love how the Rock Warriors don't blast open the wall with lasers, they simply walk through the wall. I always found the Rock Warriors to be the most imposing villains because they never uttered any dialogue, just these giant threatening silent guys that would often appear en masse. I said no dialogue, but I've just remembered we do get a comical line from them as they prepare to toss Krang into the vehicle.
And finally, myself!
and a 1, and a 2,
And once inside the vehicle, again there's a lovely level of detail that really sells this piece of technology as something very important. Look how delightfully evil the Warlord of Dimension X looks. It's so good.
It's okay. Take it for a test spin.
I love that line from one of the guards. It's okay, take it for a test spin. So this is where a majority of the episode was edited in the UK broadcast. Just as the villains grabbed their weapons, everything until I say so was not present. Firstly, we didn't get Bebop's "It's turtle bashing time." And here come the heroes. Shredder attempts to stop them with a net, and it does work briefly. Just look at the detail and fluidity of animation as Bebop rushes the screen yelling, "Warthog power!" which is a great line. So yeah, in the UK, as Bebop initially picks up his weapon, it jump cuts to Leonardo here, shoving the shield in Bebop's face, prompting him to flee in terror. And even though we're going to get so much action coming up, the next 35 to 40 seconds were horrendously butchered. Seeing Shredder wielding the crossbow is so cool. And yeah, before you ask, that scene was cut. But most infamously of all, just after Michelangelo gets a major brainstorm, we cut to Bebop with a cannonball above his head, throwing it towards Michelangelo, who, for some reason, is now wearing a helmet and had pieces of armour around him. Yes, the entire sequence where he suits up was completely removed, and it's such a shame as it's so damn good, seeing him dressed in a suit of armour chasing down Shredder, spinning his nunchucks. Yeah, the cannonball scene, in the UK it was so strange. But even back then we all knew these episodes were being edited. When the music would jump so dramatically or the staged action began to make no sense, we knew that the British Board of Film Classification had their editing scissors at the ready. Great shot of Bern Thompson and Clayton Kellerman here watching the events at the museum unfold with a twisted delight. And now we have Krang back on Earth, ready to cause trouble, personally. And I think that's what makes this episode feel even more epic. Krang is taking part in the action, which in the series was quite the rarity. Often he was stationed in the Technodrome. And yeah, the action at the museum has subsided into a standoff, but even now we're going to see some utterly magnificent animation with regards to Shredder, and, in fairness, April O'Neil too, who is animated with some wonderfully realistic struggle cycles. These scenes coming up of Shredder, even though he may be getting chewed out by Krang, and even though he throws a tantrum, he has never looked more imposing or awesome. The angles used really celebrate his look and design, and the level of rendering on the character is fantastic.
That's right, Turtles. I win.
We will also get to see one of my favourite shots of the entire series. I'll point that out when we get to it. Shredder's conversation with Krang is hilarious, as Krang basically ruins Shredder's best chance to finish the Turtles. Look at this shot. Shredder tosses away his crossbow and reaches for his communicator, all the while holding April O'Neil by the wrist. Just gorgeous animation. Every time we cut back to Shredder, he looks great. And be sure to look at how April O'Neil reacts to Shredder throughout. She doesn't run, she seems more perplexed than anything. And alongside the terrific animation, James Avery as Shredder and Pat Fraley as Krang really seem to be enjoying this scene, making each and every line worth every second of our attention.
You never let me have any fun.
And coming up is my favourite image from the episode. Just after Bebop and Rocksteady turn in disbelief, look at that. How amazing does Shredder look? And another cool little action scene coming up as the Ninja Master catches the Turtles off guard throwing a shuriken at an exhibit of explosives. You'd like to think that the exhibitions were a tad safer than that. Again, another UK edit saw that shot of the shuriken removed. Shredder turns in the UK version, but the shot is cut before we see what he has thrown, even though it's obvious from the quick shot of the explosive display that it was a throwing star.
But what?
Krang told him to back off.
And now the Turtles learn that Krang is also on the surface looking for them. But the script moves at such a breakneck speed that April reminds them that they have to be interviewed on Clayton Kellerman's show. It's a rather awesome predicament for the heroes in a half shell to be in. Goodness, I just love the way the Turtles look here. Had every episode of the series looked like this, regardless of the script, it would have been awesome. And now a comical scene that, yes, was edited in the UK due to the appearance of Michelangelo's nunchucks, but they actually did a good job with the edit. It wasn't as confusing as the other edits that had already occurred in the episode. So yes, here we are with Michelangelo's stage fright, but as we'll see, Raphael and Donatello aren't much better in front of the camera either. Oh, and I should give a little shout out to Irma. By season 3, she was beginning to cross paths with the Turtles more and more, and this is one of the earliest times in the series that she feels like a part of the gang. From what I've seen in later seasons, she's very present in the lives of the Turtles. Heck, the episode directly after this one is Attack of the 50-Foot Irma, so yeah, she was starting to make her presence felt in the series. That shot of Kellerman swooping around and pointing at the screen is fantastic, and the direction does a wonderful job here of really creating the imposing atmosphere that the Turtles now find themselves in. The bright light aimed directly at them, the well-intentioned audience of April and Irma looking on, and the yelling Clayton Kellerman. You really feel for the Turtles at this moment in time. How can they convince the public that they're not a menace when they're so nervous? And even Krang is watching the show. The poor Turtles here, their sound explanations do sound like the work of fiction, and Clayton Kellerman is enjoying every second of making them sound like fools. So just listen to Leonardo attempt to explain their current battle against evil.
We are trying to save the world from an invasion by an alien brain from Dimension X.
Oh, come on, that's a little hard to swallow. What is, the invasion, the brain, or the Dimension X?
That exchange is hilarious. Rob Paulson delivering such a deadpan line. Ah, now there's a glorious shot of the Technodrome, that's more like it. And with regards to the voice actors, all involved, as per usual, are doing a fantastic job of really selling the drama and comedy of this script. As I said earlier, easily one of the best voice casts assembled for a cartoon of the 1980s. And finally, Krang arrives to take on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Look at all the lighting on Krang, it really sells the raw power of this awesome machine.
Sounds like Krang! He must have been taking voice lessons. Wow.
I love that shot of Donatello, a slight upshot enough to make his look upwards all the more dramatic. This episode is just the best. A nice little attention to detail here. Michelangelo coming out last and bumping into Raphael, creating a little brief domino effect. That shot of Krang looming over the overly confident Turtles is just terrific. It's sometimes incredibly hard to get across how important direction and timing are in animation. Not to throw another show under the bus, but the Transformers, ACOM's work on the 3rd season of that show, fails in so many ways that at times it's almost unwatchable. Look at this shot of Donatello using his foot to cleverly sever the connection, and as he falls out of shot, take another look because he retreats back into his shell to protect his fall. I love this little exchange between Clayton and Michelangelo.
Gotcha!
Oh, you've come out of hiding.
Yeah!
Lucky for you. Also a huge shout out to Krang with the use of the word arrivederci. And yes, we're of course about to see evil undone by its own selfishness, with Shredder accidentally presenting a problem with regards to Krang's conquest of the Ninja Turtles. And let's be honest, if Shredder could have done this intentionally, I'm sure he would have. Anything to undermine Krang. Another wonderful piece of animation coming up. Watch Leonardo unsheathe and throw his katana. It looks so awesome. God, is it any wonder why people rate this episode so highly? Krang's uh-oh makes me chuckle every time, accompanied by the noise of the machine failing to cooperate. And, as gross as this is, I always laugh at Krang's tail being stuck in some chewing gum. Oh, New York of the 1980s, you and your litter problems. I love the way Shredder just aggressively pulls Krang inside the vehicle. And the villains depart to fight and bicker another day. Nice glow on the molten magma there, though it always made me laugh how quickly that stuff would rise up. Methinks it would take a goodly while to rise to the surface, you know, given the distance to the Earth's core. And even though this episode has reached its conclusion, the Japanese animators aren't going to let us go without one more awesome visual. It's coming up shortly after Clayton Kellerman here reveals that even though they saved his life and he's convinced that they are good, he's still going to rubbish them in order to get ratings. As Donatello reacts in disbelief, just look at the way his arms flail. Again, the use of motion lines painted on top of the cells is just beautiful. Wait for it. Any second now.
Great. Our name is still mud in this city.
Look at that. How about that? So good.
Some days it just doesn't pay to come out of your shell.
I mean, to summarise my feelings for this episode would be rather pointless, wouldn't it? I've praised the heck out of this episode, rightly so I would say. I think this is honestly the pinnacle of what the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series could achieve. Great story, captivating action, wonderful comedy, and utterly astounding Japanese animation. Turtles on Trial, we salute you. And that's the end of this episode commentary. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.